before then.
We can, so for participants on the phones, does anybody on the phone want to make public comment? If so, you can either raise your hand or put your name in chat, and then we'll call on you when it's your turn.
I think we're still muted.
Okay, Mike would like to make public comment. Mike will add your name to the list. Does anybody here want to make public comment? No.
Right at 6 o'clock.
Yep.
All right, it's 6 p.m., so I will call the meeting to order. And the first item is, I gather, Kim, you want to add something to the agenda about meeting dates?
Yes, that is correct. I'd like to make a motion to add a 6th agenda item to tonight's meeting, and that's just to have a discussion about the upcoming dates and times of meetings for the rest of the year.
All right, well, hearing no objection to that, I will add that to the agenda. So the first item on the existing agenda is the adoption of minutes from the previous meeting. You each have a copy of that in front of us, at least I do. And I think we circulated this before, so we have a chance to look at it. And if so, does anybody have any comments or suggestions? If not,
we accept the minutes from the last meeting.
Okay, I second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. For signature. The next item is public comments.
So the only one who raised their hand for public comment was Mike Cantwell online. Mike, you'll need to unmute yourself.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. Mike, do you mind, before you start, just introduce yourself, and if you represent an organization, what organization you represent?
Yes, my name is Mike Cantwell. I'm a longtime resident of Arlington. I'm not representing any organization. So my public comments are in reference to the memo that was written, procedures for facilitating partisan affiliation of interested officers of elections. So I just stumbled upon this. I usually attend these meetings maybe once a year, but it's the first time I saw this. So I have a lot of concerns about this, and I know it's at the state level and the local level, but I'm very concerned that independent voters and independent candidates are not represented at the polls or in the electoral process. And I was wondering, as you were writing this memo, did you happen to take any effort to interview any past independent candidates or independent voters to get their opinion on this? And then, I just want to point out that we had two independent, we had one independent candidate who was elected twice for school board in the early 2000s. And then we had John Weistat was elected in 2014 and was narrowly defeated in 2018. And then when I ran for election for Arlington County Board in 2021, independent candidates received about 40% of the vote. So I guess my question to the board is, did you take any of that into consideration, or did you do any research with any of the independent candidates or independent voters in Arlington?
I will address this more when we're on the subject, but the short answer is no, because the code provides no position for independents. It provides only for the two major parties. The rules are designed for the two major parties and not independents. In fact, in some respects, it goes out of its way to exclude them, the way the code is worded. That's just the way the law is. I can't do anything about that, and I can't create rules, like we as a board can't create rules to accommodate that independence without violating code rules, because they're just not really provided for by the code.
Was there any, so it looked like there was an opinion by the state's attorney general related to this, correct?
Yeah.
Did the electoral board consider responding to that and saying that they were concerned about that independent voters and candidates would not be represented? Was there any sort of response to the attorney general's opinion?
Which opinion? The one in 2006 that more directly references unaffiliated election officers was just that in 2006. None of us were on the board at the time. I have no idea if the board at the time said anything. Generally, there isn't a response made to attorney general's opinions. They are technically issued to an individual, as you can see from the, if you go to the website and look at any of the opinions, regardless of whether they're electoral or not, they're addressed to the person who requested them. They are considered useful to other people, but one could say they technically aren't, like, they're not binding on anybody other than the attorney general and the person to whom they're, for anybody that's in the tax field, they're like private letter rulings from the IRS. They apply to the IRS and the person to whom they are addressed, and nobody else. Nobody else can use them technically, but we do use them often.
I think we have a whole robust conversation planned.
Yes.
Later
So
on.
Yeah, so I'll just go ahead and stop now. I would like to hear the discussion. And by the way, it does sound like you put a lot of effort into writing this memo. I really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to your further comments. And I guess my only remedy then is to go through my state representative, my state senator, and then also perhaps communicating directly with the attorney general. Would you agree with those are my remedies for this?
Yeah, I can get into some of that when I'm going over the memo.
Okay. All right.
All
right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, are there any other public comments? All right, then the next item on the agenda is precisely the election officer appointments and assignment process. And as the prior discussion indicated, Dominic has taken the lead.
Can we maybe appoint first, just to get that out of the way?
Okay. The next item on the agenda then will be appointment of election officers and the assignment process.
So we're just going to appoint election officers. So we have 17 people who have applied to work the polls since the electoral board last appointed people at their previous meeting. So if we could get a motion just to approve these individuals as election officers so that we can move forward with assigning them.
I'll make the motion to appoint these 17 election officers for a term ending February 28th, 2024. Thank you, 2025. Yeah.
Right,
I mean, if we'd like, we could appoint them to terms that have already expired, but.
Yeah, no, we don't want to do that.
All right, I second the motion. Is there any discussion on this?
No.
Thank
Let me
you.
say I'm glad to see more names, although I don't recognize any of them. And, so all in favor of approving these 17 names, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, that's approved.
Now the next one. Thank you.
And do you want to, if this item included the
Yes.
assignment process?
And now we can have the because I think
Yeah.
Dominique had wanted to provide some background.
Yeah, so I will.
Take that, Rich. Okay.
I will move the. I just have a question. Did somebody already edit my resolution and memo to correct my grammatical and because I see red lines.
I printed Rich's edits.
That makes sense.
We've got
Then I will move the resolution that was attached to my memo, which is in the material that was on the agenda. I know that there will be some amendments proposed and probably accepted, but I will propose the resolution that was attached to the memo.
All right, I second that.
Thank you, and now we can have. with that, I will click. I'm not going to read the memo. I'm not necessarily going to go over everything that was in the memo. It is on the website with the agenda material. As I pointed out in the memo, the base assumption I made here was a lot of this comes from 24.21 section 1, 24.2115 in the code, which is the primary code section for the appointment of election officers. It dictates that we are supposed to the extent practicable, and there was an Attorney General opinion on this, which, with all due respect to the Attorney General and his office, provided very little guidance to what we were supposed to do and loaded a lot more on the word practicable, which isn't great because it's the word that I think we were looking for some guidance on what it means to be, what is practical and what is not practical. The code provides that election officers should be appointed to the extent possible from lists provided by the parties, lists of nominations by the parties, the two major political parties. The formal description is the two parties receiving the most and second most votes for governor at the last election. You can see why independents are not contemplated in this, because they're not really a party. This is all about parties, and independents are not parties. In fact, because it only talks about the two parties, in some respects, the Greens and the Libertarians and other parties that may be recognized by the state also don't get any formal representation in this. It then says that we are supposed to aim for what is colloquially called a party parity. The way, again, it is referenced is that if there are an even number of election officers at polling place, a number of Democrats and Republicans, I'm just going to use those two. I'm not going to use the formalized terminology here because most votes and second most votes is just difficult. It's almost always going to be the Democrats and the Republicans that get the first and second amount total votes. So that there need to be an equal number of Democrats and Republicans. If there are an odd number of election officers, that number can differ by one. There can be one more of one party than the other. We are not supposed to use more than 1/3 of any precinct is not supposed to have more than 1/3 unaffiliated officers. Again, everything in this section, almost every sentence in this section has the word practicable in it. If practicable is all over this section. So if there aren't enough party affiliated officers, we are not required. And that is also in an Attorney General opinion. We are not required to have parity. Or we are not required to have perfect parity and abide by all these things. So for example, at the moment, we do not have enough party affiliated election officers to staff an election according to the code, like formally according to the code. We have way too many unaffiliated people. We can't staff the way the code contemplates. Section 24.2115 goes on to say that we are required to appoint a chief and an assistant chief. Those two people are supposed to be of different parties. The contemplation is one Republican, one Democrat. We don't have rules about which one is which. If you talk to the folks in Fairfax, you will hear that they always allow the governor's party to have all of the chiefs and the out party to have all of the assistant chiefs. That's not required by code. That's their practice, which is fine. They can have their practice. If we are going to use unaffiliated officers for any of those chief and assistant chief roles, we have to let the parties know in advance of the election, no later than 10 days before the election, so that the parties may make additional nominations. You'll have probably, since we're here in Northern Virginia, have heard of the lawsuit that occurred in Prince William County 2 years ago, where they were the court forced, in effect, the appointment of additional Republican officers in substitution of unaffiliated folks. You'll see a footnote. The precedential value of that order is up in the air because it was just an order on a temporary injunction. It was not a full case, so it's got some value, but we'll see what, if anybody else gets sued on that. One thing that you will notice in the memo, the code does not put any of the onus for this stuff on us as a board or Gretchen as the registrar. It is on the parties. The parties are supposed to nominate. We are supposed to appoint from those lists, which we do when we get them. Up until about 2 years ago, no party had sent in a list in 15 years, 20 years, something like that. As long as Gretchen has been involved in the Arlington office, she had never seen a list. That is changing. There is more attention to this section and the procedures that go along with it, which is fine. But what the code does not do is say that if we do not have parity, we as a board are required to go out and make sure that we get the people to get to parity. The parties have to do that. We can facilitate, which is what this memo is about. We are happy to do so where it will not affect our ability to staff an election, but also where it will not put a lot of additional burden on the staff. There's a lot of stuff going on for the staff. We don't want them to be sitting around just worrying about party affiliations for election officers, which is where the recommendations in the memo come from. While the question is always presented as sort of one question about what we're going to do to help, it's actually 3 questions at this present moment where we are now. 2 which I think would be clear to everyone. One is for people who apply in the future. That's the easiest question to me. People who are not currently election officers, who have never applied to be election officers. That's a question of how we might deal with our application process to facilitate party affiliations. The second part of it is people who are already election officers. As you will see in the memo, they are broken down further into 2 questions. One, we as a practice in Arlington appoint, the code allows us to appoint for a 3-year term. We don't. We appoint for 1-year terms. Usually March 1st to February 28th or 29th, depending on the year, with the exception of presidential years where we adjust that a little so that the people appointed the year before can serve in the presidential primary. We almost always just roll over the entire list. We reappoint everyone that has been in everyone that we just appointed plus everyone else. If you come on in February at the February meeting when we do this, you will see we appoint a list of 2,100 people. They were all people who were already on the list, plus anybody who's applied up until that point. After that process, typically what happens is everyone is sent some sort of notification saying you've been appointed an election officer. Do you accept your appointment? When are you available? Is there any elections that you think you might not be available?
Oh, yes.
That's a separate point of contact with these people that can provide for facilitation. The second part of them is, what do we do about November? Those folks have already been appointed. They've already accepted their appointments. We would have to send a specific communication to them. That has been done in the past. The recommendation at this stage is a lot looser on that issue. To summarize the recommendations, the first recommendation on the first set of people, applicants who have not yet applied, is to do what a lot of other jurisdictions do. Right now, what Arlington does, if you go to the website and you click on, apply to be an election officer, it will take you to a state site on the elect website. That is a centralized form. The first question is, what is your locality? You put in Arlington or Alexandria or any other. I'm not proposing to completely remove that, but right now, that's where you fill it out. That information comes down. That application has no opportunity for anybody to signal what party they might consider themselves to belong to or they wish to represent. If you go to, say, Alexandria, Fairfax, I think Loudoun has one as well. Does Alexandria have their own? Yes, they have a questionnaire. They just do their system a little bit oddly that I didn't, no offense, didn't care for. Puts a lot more work on you guys. But, yeah.
There's an assumption we have choice.
Yes, so they have their own, what I will call a standalone application that is not attached to that state website, where they then also have a question that basically says, would you like us to forward your information to a party? If so, check, Republican, Democrat. They then send the information to the parties because it is the parties that have to tell us that those people are okay. We have no role in that. We can't assign people. We can't take them at their word. Elect has said in the past that those two things are not permissible. Only the party can nominate people to be affiliated election officers. The office cannot assign. The election officer cannot self-select. They are not entitled to self-select. Only the parties can do that. So the recommendation in the resolution is that we develop, my understanding from Melissa is that this should be possible with Airtable to create our own standalone application similar to the others that has all the stuff in the state application, but also has this question that will allow us to then send stuff to the parties for them to do. The follow-on to that is what happens after they apply. The recommendation is to reduce the amount of tracing of people. What we will do is for people who apply, we will do what we have always done, which is the office will do some vetting to make sure that they are registered voters, that they live in Virginia, like all of the usual stuff, that they are eligible at a base level to be an election officer. We will then go ahead and appoint them the way we always have. If the party that they requested has not affirmatively said they are okay by them, we will appoint them the way we generally do as unaffiliated officers. As we just did with these 17 people. The code does not require us to appoint officers as party representatives. We just appoint officers. So if the parties then want to come back later, so if, for example, in the new system, if these 17 people, if some of those 17 people had said, I want to be a Democrat, I want to be a Republican, we sent them to the parties hadn't responded to us yet. We appointed them as unaffiliated. The parties come back 3 weeks from now and say, these people are okay. We will just move them on. It's just a record keeping matter. We don't have to be, we as the board don't have to be involved again. In order to prevent us from having people sitting, waiting for responses from the parties, the recommendation is the parties can take as long as they want with their names. When they tell us that they are or aren't okay, they will get moved into the R or D column. They will start as unaffiliated folks. That seems to be, from what I've heard from other jurisdictions, I think the best way, I think the way Alexandria described it to me, now, Alyssa, you actually lived their process, was they take the question and then go back and ask the person who applied more questions before they proceed, which seems like a lot more work. Oh, okay.
No, it's a passive system. They're like, if you have a problem with any of these people, tell us now or we're putting them in your party list.
Yeah, and see, that, I wasn't thrilled with that. Again, because that sort of defaults to a self-selection. If the person says, I want to be a Republican or a Democrat, then we make them that until the party says no. And that's not, I think, how we're supposed to work. So I would rather go the opposite way, which is they are unaffiliated until some party tells us they are, on their list. That is part one. Part two is the folks who are already election officers. Similarly to the application process, it seems relatively easy for us to put a similar question regarding party affiliation on the stuff we send people in February once we reappoint them. To say, would you like your information forwarded for affiliation purposes, or would you like to change your affiliation, either from a party to unaffiliated or from one party to the other, if you've had a, road to Damascus moment in the last year. Because we already have a contact point with them. We have to send them that information. We ask some other questions about when they're available, if they've had any contact information that they need to update, bank account information if they get paid to be, if they take the pay for being an election officer, we need their bank information because we only do direct deposit now. So that also seems like a relatively easy thing to do. The third is contacting people in advance of November. The last time we did that, and as a matter of fact, I'm not even sure it's we. Kim, you may have been the only person on the board when that letter was sent, but it was sent by Gretchen anyway, not the board. I heard it myself. I heard it personally. I'm not taking the second hand. I went to several trainings where people asked the question, do I have to affiliate? Am I going to have to affiliate? I don't want to affiliate, My ethics officer at the federal agency I work for has said if I affiliate, that's a Hatch Act violation. Let's put aside whether it is or not. There are differing opinions on that. I'm not going to tell somebody who works as a GS-13 in an agency with 17 layers above them that they should go tell their ethics officer to take a hike and to do what they want, because they could get fired. So the recommendation in this resolution is not to do anything on that at the moment. It is another sort of delegation of, let's look at this and see if we can come up with some language that will not scare people away. That delegation would be to me and Gretchen and Alyssa to try to come up with something to report back what we think should be done with those people. The other two are definitely, we should go ahead and start that process. We would not be flying solo on that. We are in good company. There are other jurisdictions doing similar things. I think this also, the method I have proposed in the resolution also provides for it to be as passive as it can be, so that we are not taking much of an active role in the party domination process. But at the same time, we're allowing people, because one of the things I did also notice before I was on the board, I did have my hand in this sort of thing, is there are a lot of people who don't realize they have to do two things at the moment. One, contact their party. Two, fill out the application. They'd contact the party would send names in, those people would never fill out the application, and they'd never wind up getting appointed because we didn't have the information to do the other checks. Well, yes, we're supposed to appoint from lists given to us by the parties. We can only do that if we're sure that they're actually eligible to be election officers, which if they don't send in their application, we can't really check.
Or if we don't have a phone number or email.
Yes, and we can't then follow up and say, hey, what's going on with it? So there have been issues where I think people have not realized that there was a two-step process at the moment. This will sort of combine the processes. I don't think it creates too much of an issue to the extent that there are still things to test out. That's in the resolution. I think the resolution is basically Alyssa and I will work on some sort of application, which will come back for some sort of approval after the primary for implementation. There might be some amendments. Mine is just basically that the board would delegate to me the ability to approve the application. I think we might change that. And then after that, once we've approved that, then we can go ahead and put it on the website, let people know. To the extent anybody, I don't know if the League of Women Voters has any sort of link over about people who want to be election officers, but to the extent any civic organizations are currently linking to the state website, we'll make sure that they know to link to our new form, that sort of thing. We will worry in some respects. I think the resolution kind of puts out the question of the reappointed officers, because we don't have to worry about that till February. That we'll do something and we'll worry about it at some point in the future, the precise wording of it and how it's going to work within the context of that. And the letter, whether it's going to be sent, is still a decision to be made. There is a delegation in the resolution to me, Gretchen, and Alyssa to figure out if there is a way to phrase that doesn't scare people off. That said, I would like to say that I do not believe, given the situation in Arlington and what has happened to date, that we will ever be in a position, I don't want to say never, I'm a lawyer, I know better than to say never, but there is no foreseeable point in the future where unaffiliated election officers will not be used in an election. I just do not see us having enough people on the lists to staff an election, particularly not a November election, where this November, what do you think, Alyssa? 850 people need to work? Good luck finding that enough people to staff. I believe I mentioned in the memo, Currently, I believe there's 40 people on the Republican list, about 40 people on the Democratic list. That's not even enough to have a chief and an assistant chief at every precinct we have. We have 54, not including Cap. So there's a lot of room that those lists have to grow before we get to anything resembling telling unaffiliated folks they can't work. I will also make a note. The code only says that we have to have a chief and an assistant chief, one of each party. We have registration clerks, which those of you work know. They are effectively assistant chiefs, a second assistant chief. I do not read the code to require us to worry about partisan affiliation once we get past the one chief and one assistant chief. In all likelihood, therefore, there will be spots in those registration clerk positions and elsewhere such that if we have, and also at times, we have some precincts. I was a second assistant chief at a precinct once upon a time. That once you get to 3 or 4 or 5, the code is now silent about whether there needs to be parity, who gets those positions. Since we have a wealth of unaffiliated people, in all likelihood, those would be unaffiliated folks. So I don't know if that provides any solace to Mr. Cantwell about where independents factor in this. I did think about them, but in the context of the purpose of the memo, the purpose of the resolution, and what we're trying to do, the code is very clear that we have 2 parties in effect, and the rest is not to be considered.
No, I really appreciate all this. I think it was great. And I didn't know that there would be so many unaffiliated voters that would be.
There are. I mean, most of the 2,100 are unaffiliated. So it's not like, there's still a lot of stuff that needs to go.
Yeah, and and in most cases, the unaffiliation is by choice.
Yes. I imagine there are some people who probably would affiliate if they were a little bit more aware of the process, but we'll see. And once we do what we're going to do going forward, we'll see how many people that actually encompasses, and maybe we'll have some actual data at some point about the number of people who apply and select a party, either party. I'm not even concerned about which party. How many come in saying, I don't want to be affiliated with a party, which may help us in the future. So I will stop talking at the moment. I believe there might be some, I know that the chairman has some edits to the resolution in terms of language. I don't think it changes much in the way of the substance, but.
Okay, let me go forward. First of all, I just want to commend you, Dominic, for an excellent job at looking at the issue and for proposing the way forward. I know it's been a lot of work, and I enjoyed your resolution. And Mike, I think that Dominic is right that there will always be a huge number of unaffiliated people. I do think that if there are third-party candidates running, they ought to be encouraged, if they have supporters who would like to be election officers, to get signed up so that there will be representation in the polling places of candidates who are not affiliated with either party. And I think I can safely say that Gretchen always likes having more people apply to be election officers. So that is
especially especially people who want to serve as chief or assistant chief. So yeah, we will never run out of enough of those people in Arlington.
And before I go talk about specific language, I had one basic question. Dominic, you were proposing that the website not only put on a new form that gives people an opportunity to affiliate, but it also leaves the state form on the website. I'm wondering what
no, sorry, that was not my intention. My intention was that to the extent we are telling people how to apply, we will refer them to our form. What I wanted to try to account for was if somebody winds up at the elect form and submits it, that we're not going to bounce their application just because it wasn't on our form. We'll do what we normally do with those people if they wind up there. Because if you go to the elect website, there is like a thing that says volunteer to be an election officer, and it takes you to their application. So I just wanted to make clear that we weren't going to basically cut off that avenue of applying. We were just going to try to direct because he said we can do that. We were going to direct people to whatever we establish.
Because a lot of national organizations will just link to the state
To the
form.
state,
Yeah, so anybody doing poll worker recruitment nationally, it's just easier to link.
They'll send people to elect rather than to each individual county. So I just want to be clear that we weren't gonna cut people off or start telling people, no, I'm sorry, we're rejecting your application because it didn't come through the right channel.
Go fill out this application.
Yeah.
Yeah, as well.
And I do think there are plenty of people on the website who, in their heart of hearts, do feel as though they are either Democrats or Republicans, but were never asked to affiliate. And that in part explains why there are so few election officers who are affiliated. And I think that changing the form will almost surely lead to an increase in the affiliation. Wasn't there a time in years past where people were asked whether?
So we've never asked for it on the application. What we did, because it's actually, you mentioned a 2-step process, it's actually a 3-step process. Now, because it always was, you would apply to be an election officer, and then there was a secondary process where the electoral board appoints you, and then you respond to that you receive a notice of appointment where you then accept the appointment as an election officer. And so we never had it on the application, but we did have it on that notice of appointment form that you got after the electoral board appointed you, asking your party preference.
Except that it was it turned out to be, and it wasn't anybody here's fault. Everyone thought this was how we should do things. It turned out that when this became a bigger issue for folks, said, oh, no. The question was, do you want to represent the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, or basically, do you feel comfortable doing either? And for people who said either, in order to get to the parity numbers, the office would assign them a party affiliation for that election, which eventually elect said, oh, wait, no, that can't move.
Yeah, all of that happened in 2020, 2021, that time period. But that
which is why that came off, but that's not what we're proposing. We're proposing a much more, would you like us to refer your information to the party for affiliation purpose? And we would like, the point will be to make it clear that they are not picking. We are not doing anything based on their say-so. We are going to take their information, provide it to the parties. I don't think the resolution discusses specifics about how we are going to transmit the information to the parties. I've had a conversation with Alyssa. We think it might be possible to do something like what Fairfax does. For those that don't know, it effectively is that they provide a way for the parties to access their lists themselves without any further thing. Maybe we can't do that. Maybe it'll have to be that when we get a list, like the first of every month, we will send a list of everyone who's applied to be, who's asked to be a Republican, asked to be a Democrat. We send it to the parties and they take it from there.
The easiest way is just email automation. So when an application comes in and somebody's requested a party, an email just goes to the emails that the parties have given us saying this person has applied to be an election officer and has expressed a.
The resolution provides, I believe, that we are going to explore the best way to get that.
That's certainly the
in the most passive way possible.
Yeah.
If that is the secondary, that is the better way than trying to filter and provide people access to things, and that's
the contractor has.
It's okay. Listen, we'll talk. Yeah, the resolution says explore options, so let's explore options after this meeting.
We'll not do that here.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Go ahead.
So I was going to say that I made a couple of redlined proposed changes, the great majority of which were just simply my preference for words to some of the original words, and I don't know if it changes the substance.
I do not think so. I was aware of what you had proposed, and I would treat them as friendly amendments. I would adopt.
Now, the ones that aren't editorial totally are numbers 1 and 2.
Correct. Number 2, I take number 2 as So I think there might be, was this printed out and left on shares, Tanya, or are we the only ones that? Okay, so number 2 is a change to the, what is it, paragraph?
It's the second numbered paragraph.
The second number, yes, about who will be authorizing. The change that Rich had originally proposed, so everyone in the room knows, was to make it a little bit more, I didn't think it changed the substance, it made it a little more explicit that in his language, the delegation, that when I say so, because I'm the vice chair, that when I give my approval, that it will be deemed the approval of the full board, which is not how I phrased it. I need to go back to class on how to write legislative English.
So are you suggesting then that everything?
Yes, I am fine with everything that Rich has proposed. The first one, which is that that whatever we develop as a standalone application, the board will be informed about what that looks like before it goes live.
Yes.
The second one was how precisely we're doing that delegation, and the idea is I will approve it, we can go, we don't need to bring it back to another meeting of the board.
Now, in terms of the other delegation that you had talked about, I think it's just fine, where you would like to be the one to confer.
Yes, because I believe
Gretchen
yeah.
and Alicia, and then come back to us. That's just.
Yeah, that is a clear delegation, just as last month I was delegated with coming back with this report, that we will come back in July with another recommendation, meaning the board is going to have another conversation about that and another chance to review something. So okay. I don't feel like it's a.
Well, with these friendly amendments, I am very happy with it. Kim, do you have any comments?
I mean, the only comment that I really had is that I would like to see the application before it goes live. I would also like, if it is possible, if the decision is made, to do it through Airtable, just to get a demonstration of how that works. Sure. And also how the emails go out, just for my own informational sake. Sometimes I'm a visual person, so.
And historically in Arlington County, the secretary of the Electoral Board has reviewed all correspondence that went out to election officers, including the application and the notice of appointment form. Alan Harrison would come in for several hours before every election and appointment cycle, and we'd have everything printed out for him to review. Admittedly, that maybe hasn't been happening in the last few years, but that has been a very standard operating procedure policy in Arlington.
I will ask a question, which maybe I'm the one that should know the answer to it, but does anybody think we should alter the first paragraph, this delegation and providing information, to insert, I don't think we need to be specific about what precisely needs to be presented, because I think we can do that on understanding.
Yes.
The question is, to the extent, do we need to put something, or should we put something in there to say that if there are any concerns or objections raised to the proposed application at the demonstration phase, that it needs to come back to the board in full at a meeting? This is an open meetings question, in effect, like whether I would hesitate to have a conversation about the application and changes and tinkering with it without it coming back to the board. If we're going to have a conversation, the three of us, it's a different story if I'm going to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, no, that, like I said, historically it was the secretary who did a lot of those revisions, and maybe that was just Alan, because that's who was secretary when I started. So rather than the full board.
I think that I would.
It's up to the board. Do you want to bring it back in front?
Have the indulgence to say, if at the demonstration phase there is any concern raised, that we will bring it back for another discussion and approval.
I think that would go precisely to Kim's concern.
Yes.
And that would be easy enough to add to that number one.
And we will redraft how Robert's rulesy do we want to be about this? We could sit here and hammer out the specific language of what number 1 is going to look like with that addition, or we can.
Standalone. I think it's actually number 2. The vice chair can be authorized to approve the standards. So we want to scratch vice chair.
Yeah,
We
so
wanna
it's
say
the
electoral
deputy, but the deputy general registrar proposed standalone action not be deemed authorized for use by the Office of Elections and Election Board once this language and format have been approved by the vice chair.
You're looking, oh, I'm looking.
Number
at
2 on Rich's.
Right, and so I would say on number 2, add a clause unless another member of the electoral board
Objects to.
or raises concerns about the proposed language.
In which we'll all say, in which case the application will be returned to the board for further discussion and approval.
And you've got every word, of course.
That's why we record these meetings. And just a point of clarification, the deputy general registrar doesn't really exist. So we could say deputy director or, yeah.
Isn't her technical?
So everybody, no, there's general registrar and then everybody is a deputy registrar. No, that code was changed 2 years ago. So there's no more assistant registrars.
Everybody?
Everyone's a deputy registrar now, like a deputy sheriff.
Are you the only deputy director of the city?
Yes.
Okay, well.
Or chief
Why don't we
deputy.
just say that?
Okay, so we will change deputy general registrar
Sorry.
to deputy director of elections to account for the vice chair's ignorance as to
It's
what
fine.
her
No, it's
title
fine.
is. I think the code says that there still is a deputy. It contemplates like a
Yes,
chief.
yeah, no, but it's
Okay.
everybody.
No, but the way, there's a provision that says
We'll
we're
review-
supposed
We
to
can review the provision.
to authorize a deputy. You hire them, but we authorize them for a term that's coextensive with yours.
So that's everyone.
That's
Okay.
that applies to every employee in the
Yeah,
office.
everyone's
Ah.
deputy, yeah.
All right, so do we have any further discussion on our proposed resolution?
Question.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, thanks to the board and Dominic for this great initiative. For the last point,
In the
point
resolution.
9, about, I think the resolution that the board will consider making communication to all the existing election officers before November. Just seems, I was just encourage the board maybe to try to do that if possible, since you'll have to come up with a communication anyway before February. That's alleviates their concerns about Hatch-Ack or whatever. But they'll need to come up with the right communication in any case, and it will be very helpful, I think, for the parties to be able to get some more affiliated election officers. Again, there was a point some years ago where maybe 50% or more of the election officers were affiliated, but there were a lot of questions about that because of the previous processes. And so whether those, for whatever reason, there has been one communication sent out, but the parties don't have access to all the emails of the election officers. I guess that would be another option if the election office would make those available to the parties so they could reach out and ask them if they want to be affiliated. But anyway, so that would just be my suggestion, if possible, that the communication be sent before November.
I will just say that the email question is a matter of whether we can or can't. It's not whether we want to or don't. The code is very clear about what we are able to release to people and what we are not. Well, it's clear about what we can release to people, and the assumption is that anything that's not releasable is not releasable, which means that things like email addresses are not contemplated by anything.
Email addresses, but I think it's the language that's in the email that election officers receive. But correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, but you are on our list of election officers, right? So any email communication that we send out to election officers, you are getting in your capacity as just a resident of Arlington County signed up to be an election officer in Arlington County.
Well, no, so I think the question is, I think I put this in the memo. At least it was in my brain, but I'm not sure if it was in my brain to say, and I haven't said it, as opposed to writing it, is if because one of the option on the letter is, as I said at the beginning, this job is that of the parties, not of the board. That the list of election officers is public. It can be provided to the parties.
It's the names.
The list of registered voters can also be provided to the parties. So in theory, if email addresses are permitted to be sent, the party can contact the election officers themselves. That's the question.
We can discuss that.
Yeah.
All
But
right.
it's a data security thing. It's not, I don't think we have discretion on it. It either,
It's a FOIA issue.
yeah, we can or we can't kind of thing.
Right. If that's not possible, then the election office could send out a
Yeah.
communication to all.
Which is why we're going to have this discussion about how best to proceed. And whether to proceed and how best to do it, if we're going to recommend to do so.
Is there any other comments from anybody here, either on the board or present or online on this resolution? Well, here,
So can I just ask you to just restate? No, because for the purpose of the minutes, but also because we've added some amendments.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
so I think the resolution that's now before the board is as originally written by Dominic with the suggested edits that I proposed, along with Kim's suggested language that would go into paragraph 2 with the clause that begins unless, so that.
Gretchen, you wrote that down, right?
Yes,
Okay.
and the meeting recorded it.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is not part of the resolution, but Kim, we will provide an inline updated,
Yeah.
what it looks like after the amendment,
After this meeting.
Thank you.
Okay.
to be included with the minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything further at all on this?
Okay.
All right, then I ask that we vote on this. All of those in favor of the resolution as amended here today, signify by saying aye.
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 All right, so we have adopted the resolution. Thank you very much. The last item on the agenda is ranked choice voting and the outreach updates.
Yes, so. Oh boy, all right, let me write this down so I can take notes on this. Thank goodness for recording, right? So I emailed the county board and the county manager and the county chief of staff. They were all emailed and copied and on the communication that we approved about making sure that there was a much better ranked choice voting outreach effort this year. So we had made it clear to the county that it actually, per the code, it's their responsibility to be doing outreach, that we will provide the materials, but they are responsible for doing the outreach around ranked choice voting. I was actually surprised at how quickly I received response. I had one county board member who literally immediately sent me an email and said, "Can we talk?" I was like, "Sure." So we had a conversation, and I just explained, like, look, we just want to make sure that this is much more robust. You all chose to do this. You all voted to do this by ordinance, and we just want to make sure that it is successful, that the outreach is successful, and that when voters go to the poll, they have a better idea than they did last year of what they're supposed to do and what ranked choice voting is. And so this information has now been shared with the communications department. And Gretchen, do you have any updates on that?
Yeah, so I met with the acting person in charge of the communication and public engagement team. I don't know what her official title is, I apologize. And we did a brief overview on, so it looks like we have materials created, and the CAPE team, once again, that's communications and public engagement team, will work to help push out the materials that are already created, because they have more contacts with community organizations, and that is really where their strengths lie. So we are talking about ranked choice voting. I do think the focus will be on November more so than the primary, because once again, this is a Democratic primary, and I think there is hesitancy to wade into what is at its root a party nomination process. So we have continued to do outreach requested by organizations such as League of Women Voters and NAACP. Those are the only requests we've had come in this time, and we're continuing to field interview requests. We've been contacted by 3 media outlets at this point.
National media?
No, WAMU,
Okay.
the
Local.
Post.
More local.
And then I think ABC came by
Yeah, like right at the beginning.
right at the beginning.
Mainly to get people. So,
Question, would the outreach materials be based on a single race, RCB?
that they are all based on single race RCB this year. So we're not going to talk about fractions if we don't have to.
And would outside organizations such as the League be able to ask board members to be at some of our presentations?
Electoral board or county board?
County.
Board.
The folks
Yes.
down the hall or the folks braiding?
We're busy enough.
Yeah, no county board. So, so that is, I think the county board does recognize that they have a role in ranked choice voting, and especially explaining why they voted to adopt ranked choice voting as the selection method for county board. The county board, we did have a county board member show up at an event that we did with the NAACP to speak to why they were doing ranked choice, why they adopted ranked choice
So
voting.
you can always just send them an email and get them on.
You
I won't speak for my colleagues, but I'm always happy to participate in things as well.
Yeah.
I'm curious, I went to a presentation that was done about dual race ranked choice voting at the Arlington Civic Federation in connection with the Democratic endorsement primary, which was a dual race ranked choice voting process. Has anybody received any feedback about whether people thought that that was in any way confusing or was well described, and if people were happy with the way that election won?
I
realize you were not involved in it.
I can only, so I think it's always important to remember that people are far more likely to contact you when they don't like something than when they do like something. So my very small sample size for, we did have candidates who participated in the school board endorsement process, or just, and they did stop in and they wanted to know what the difference was between that endorsement, how we ran ranked choice voting in county board last year and how the Democratic Party was running ranked choice voting in that endorsement process this year. You're saying dual race, which is I don't know what you mean by dual race.
I meant the way that we did it last year, and
Yeah.
I guess
A vote for 2.
Yeah, a vote for 2.
What would in the old system have been?
And there was, and because the Fairfax County Democratic Party used a very different ranked choice voting process when they did their school board endorsements last year, and I don't want anyone to be confused with that process. The one that the Democratic Party ran, Arlington Dems ran this year for school board, it was very similar to the one that we did last year with a small change in tabulation. But that small change in tabulation did not apply or would not have impacted a 2-seat race with 4 candidates running, because it is like if you had 3 or more candidates that were being elected, there's a different calculation for how you do the fraction for when you have to calculate the surplus fraction a second time. That was never going to enter into the equation for this school board nominating process. So the confusion that people had just didn't apply to this race at all. Like I said, we did hear people that were confused, but it wouldn't have factored into this election.
You have to change the denominator on the second one. On a second downward.
If anybody is interested, they can contact me and I will email you. I will email you the explanation that somebody else has given me that clearly illuminates what the difference is, but it is very minor. And when we're talking fractions of votes, the actual implication in a large race is nominal. especially in the school board endorsement process where both candidates cross the threshold in the first round. It's the best of my understanding. So, yep. Does that help?
So it didn't even have to be implemented in their case. So there was a lot.
So the only thing I did hear some confusion, but that's not to say that there weren't good things said. It just means that there were people who were confused who came to us for answers. But that happens, so.
All right.
Yep.
The one remaining item on the agenda is future meeting dates. I suspect we're mostly interested in meeting dates around the primary election in June.
Just for the benefit of everyone in the room, we agreed at the beginning of the year that our regular meeting date would be the second Tuesday of the month at 6 o'clock. We are now going, which is not today. We have not managed to be on the second Tuesday of most months this year.
So we're going to try really hard.
We're going to try really hard to lock down the rest of the dates and then clear our schedules so we're not changing future dates. I think the two dates on the calendar at the moment that we're going to talk about right now are the one in June because of the primary being right around it, and the one in November, again, because of the election being right on top of it.
Okay, so the second Tuesday is June 11th.
Yeah.
The week before the
Primary, and is there a proposal to change that date?
Yeah, could we move that to the 24th?
24th of June, so the Monday after the election.
So certification.
The election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I say this asking, is there any reason that we would need to meet before
I don't think so.
June 18th? Okay.
I don't know. So your election officers you have are the ones that you will have for the primary. Okay.
Look, that we're not all going to be flying to Mars in the interim. So if there's something that the board needs to approve, we can convene a meeting and spare you all the need to trek out. We'll notice it, but you would need to trek out. We'd probably meet for 5 minutes to approve.
All right, so
Any assignments?
November second Tuesday is November the 12th.
The week after the election.
And what is proposed?
Do we want to do it Thursday or Friday? I think we're talking about moving it in the same way that we're about to move the June one to coincide with our certification.
Yeah,
So for those of you that are not aware, it has traditionally been the case that we have to certify 7 days after the election. There was legislation that will go into effect July 1st that gives us 10 days to certify, so to the Friday after the election. We suspect we are not going to be ready on Tuesday after the election in November. And we like to have our meeting at the time we're going to certify. So the question is, do we want to do it Thursday evening, the day before the deadline, or sometime on Friday? What do we think is going to happen here, Gretchen? You're the most experienced at running a presidential.
Yeah, so the one thing that we simply don't know that does prolong the canvas period right now is same-day registrations. So I won't know how many same-day registrations there are to process until obviously November 5th. So I think saying Tuesday, the night of the 14th is the safest bet.
Thursday,
sorry,
Okay.
Thursday the 14th is the safest bet for that. With the recognition that we might have everything done before that. We'll just do the official signing of the certifications.
The question was really, do you think it's going to bleed into Friday morning such that we would need to?
Our goal is to have things done as soon as possible.
I have every faith and confidence that you will be done by Thursday, assuming the state doesn't drag its heels with the list.
But once again, we can always just move the date. So, because we have to give 3 days notice, which is still Monday. So if we come out of the weekend and we don't think we're going to be done by Thursday, we can just postpone it till Friday.
Okay.
Thursday nights are often a difficult time for me. Could we try to make it 5 o'clock instead of 6 o'clock? Is that doable?
Yeah, that gives me enough notice to let work know. So yes, I can do that.
Okay.
And for me, that whole 2-week period is kind of blocked out.
Yeah.
Because I was told, so be ready.
All right.
Otherwise, we are, for the rest of the months, we are okay with the second Tuesday. So July, August, September, October. Of course, pending emergencies and other sorts of things, but we're going to try to be a little less.
And do we actually meet every month in the summer?
Do we want to cancel the August meeting? July, we'll need to do our
Election
wrap up for June. Thoughts?
We can always decide to cancel unless somebody has a reason to cancel, because you can always participate virtually too. We
Yes,
have
we
a
do
virtual
that.
meeting policy. My concern is because we need to talk, we really, at that July.
It may be the one meeting we have where we don't have deadlines looming completely over our heads to start talking about.
And yeah, I'll look at, I need to look at the rest of the schedule for the year and make sure that I get everything on that July meeting.
Okay.
So
let's say like we'll just leave August for now.
Let's leave August. If
And
it
then
turns out we
can
have no
cancel-
business,
we can cancel it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
There is so much to do this year that
I'm hesitant to cancel a meeting in a presidential year. If it were not a presidential year, I would
Considering
say.
that my understanding from you is that the process of, the very beginnings of the process of procurement start after this primary and in the summer.
Yeah, so July we'll have our new voting machine procurement, hopefully circulated. The August, so Alyssa brought this up, our state training, election uniformity training is July 18th. And so any updates we have from the Department of Elections, we wouldn't have at that July
Until
meeting, so.
And September would be a little bit late to start doing that.
But once
Because
again,
early voting starts what, the 3rd?
the 20th,
Yep.
September 20th.
all right. Does anybody else have any other items for the agenda?
I just have a question for Gretchen / Alyssa / I don't know who knows the answer to this, but conferring with the county board to the extent they have things that they need to do to get ready for early voting for November.
Yeah. Don't worry, I will start the prodding.
I can prod as well.
Yes, and unlike, I suppose, other, like, I personally would like to be included in any work sessions that,
Yeah, I don't know.
discussions.
Yeah.
I would like to take any opportunity to remind them that we exist.
It will go on in front of the board in their next board meeting, in June and July. That's when the early voting locations will be up.
Okay.
All right, unless there's any further items.
I have a question.
Sure.
And I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place to ask or not, but the conversation about the election officers inspired me to think about the election observers. Is that something that's handled by the party, and does the county electoral board have any role in that at all for the observers?
Oh, that's a great question. So yes, the election observers are handled by the parties. The only thing that we require is that they obey the 40-foot.
Oh, I'm not.
Or no, the inside poll
Oh,
watcher.
the inside
Yeah.
poll watchers. Oh.
Also handled by the party. The only time I think we get involved or Gretchen gets involved is when it's like I know in the case of like, what was it 4 years ago? Maybe it was 8 years ago, like, it's not the OECD, but it was like some European folks.
non-party, yeah,
Yeah,
non-party.
the
People who are like international observers, somebody coming from some other state that may be
So
interested
it
in
is, so admittedly.
We approve those people to be at the poll.
So admittedly, it is confusing. So we have 3 different roles that citizens can participate in for the election on election day. We have a poll worker, which is the process that we talked about today. We have a poll watcher, which those are people permitted from their parties to go inside the polls and observe the process. So you'll see them sitting behind the check-in desk or watching the voting process take place. They need authorization from the campaign and party to be able to do that, or authorization from the electoral board or the registrar if they're independent, nonpartisan observers. And then there are the poll greeters, which are the people standing outside of the 40-foot, usually passing out sample ballots about
Literature.
Yeah.
about bond.
Those latter two are all handled by the party.
Yeah, we don't
They
have
have to
any.
find them, they have to approve them.
Okay.
All
Sure.
we're doing is all we as workers do is check that they have the proper authorization.
And that they're complying with code, and if they aren't complying with code, then we can remove them. But at which point we're notifying the party that they have the right to send in another reader or what.
We will often Gretchen will get calls about people who are being too aggressive, not obeying 40 feet. She'll be talking to the party chairs being like, you got to go talk to your people.
But admittedly, it is confusing because it's worker, watcher, greeter.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
I would just, before we adjourn, I would just note that for anybody I'm always happy to answer questions. Our email addresses are not on the website, but if you email the general email address for the office, they'll get it to us.
All right, in the absence of any future
I
things,
move that we adjourn.
I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the meeting is adjourned at 7:10 PM. Thank you for coming.
With as much as we did, it still only took us 7
do you want
minutes.
your email on the
You
website?
can put my email on the website.
All of you want your emails on the website?
That's fine. My email's already on the Biba website.
You
so-
can put my
Yeah.
in
The Arlington.
meeting.gov.